Hello students, my name is Shayan Mitra, faculty member of Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering of Greater Kolkata College of Engineering and Management, JISP. Today's topic will be the continuation of the previous lecture, Introduction to Embedded Processor. So let's begin with the class. Embedded System, code name is ECE703A, lecture number 3. So as we have discussed earlier, as we know up to right now, is that embedded processor is a special microprocessor. Microcontroller is often called embedded processor. An embedded processor is used when fast processing, fast context switching and atomic ALU operations are needed. Examples of embedded processors are ARM7, Intel i90, 960, AMD 29050 and etc. Let's go to the next slide. Today's description that I am going to give is about digital signal processor. Now let's begin with that. Digital signal processor as a GPP, general purpose processor, is a single chip VLSI unit, and it means it's a very large scale integration where number of transistor MOSFETs are high in case of VLSI chip unit. It includes the computational capabilities of microprocessor and multiply and accumulate units. It means in a very small space there are more features are being included. In DSP has a large number of applications such as image processing, audio, video and telecommunication processing systems. It is used when signal processing functions are to be processed fast. Examples of these are TMS320, CXX, SARHC, Motorola 5600 XX. Let's go to the next slide. Application Specific System Processor, ASSP. ASSP is dedicated to a specific tasks and provides a faster solution. And ASSP is used as an additional processing unit for running the application in place of using embedded software. Examples of these are IIM7100, W3100A. Multiprocessor system using GPPs are multiple processors are used when a single processor does not meet the needs of different tasks. The operations of all the processors are synchronized to obtain an optimum performance. Now we will discuss about the different processor architectures such as von Neumann and Harvard architecture. So first we will introduce you to the von Neumann architecture. In case of von Neumann architecture, single memory and single bus for transferring the data into and out of the CPU has been inducted here, and as we can see in the picture also, multiplication of two numbers requires at least 3 clock cycles. That's the important part. Now how it works, that's the most important factor here. Now here is the CPU, as we have already known that the processor is included there, where we have the ALU unit system and the registers, CPU registers. Now the program and data memory are being secluded from the CPU. It has been connected with the CPU through a data bus of 8-bit and an address bus of 12 bits. Now through these both the data bus and the address bus the data can in and out of the CPU through the data bus, and address the 12 bits in 12 bit, the address in 12 bit size also can in and out of the CPU. Now from the program and data memory, the required programs and the data from the memory can get into the CPU as required. The memory, the data memory that is required to give the instruction to the CPU will go through the address. According to that, the data will be fetched through the 8-bit data bus from the program and data memory, and according to the instruction set, the CPU will perform its operations. This is the von Neumann architecture. Now the von Neumann architecture has some limitation. How? Because as you can see that each and every segment that we doesn't have a cache here, that all the program and data memory needs to be needs to go through the data bus and address bus into the CPU, and according to that the important information or important operation that has been performed also goes to the program data memory and stored there. So each and every operation takes a huge amount of time to perform, to complete a operation or to execute operation. That's why few complication or few limitation it has, and some limitation has been known as bottleneck problem, where when we need to have a fast operation, the von Neumann architecture has a limitation in that case. In case of fast processing, this architecture has some limitation. That's why we have introduced with some new architecture. We're going to discuss that in the next slide. And the next architecture that has been introduced after von Neumann architecture is Harvard architecture, which, if you can see it easily, that in case of Harvard architecture, it's just the architecture of the Harvard architecture here has a very simple differentiation from simple difference are there in Harvard architecture and with the von Neumann architecture. In case of von Neumann architecture, the program memory and data memory are segmented in a specific slot, but in case of Harvard architecture, the CPU will conduct its operation using there are different segments for program memory and data memory. It means in case of program memory, when we need to fetch the instruction, the CPU will fetch it from program memory. According to that, it fetches the data from the data memory, and it works with the data, operate on those data, and according to that we got the result, and that found result will be stored in the data memory. So in this architecture we can do two things simultaneously. It means, as you can see here, we can fetch instruction from the program memory. According to the instruction, we fetch data from the data memory, we perform the operation on the data, and after that, as we can store the data in the data memory, and simultaneously we can also execute the next program. We can simultaneously store our data from the CPU, and also at the same time we can also fetch the next instruction, the program instruction we need to be executed. So after performing an operation, that CPU will store the data, and fetching the next programming instruction that need to be executed will happen at the very same time. It means simultaneously. That's why it means in case of Harvard architecture, the speed of the processor, the speed of the process has been increased because of this specific architecture. So but in also, that's why it has been said here that both programming instruction and data can be fetched at the same time. Operational speed is higher than von Neumann, as you can see in this architecture. To improve this architecture, we have also evolved from the Harvard architecture, and we have get into the next architecture is that Super Harvard architecture, DSP processor. Now what we have here, we have some very specific architecture, and it is different from Harvard architecture. What is that? We have said here that DSP algorithms spend their most of the time in loops, so instruction cache is added. Processing of many high frequency signals in real time is possible in case of the Super Harvard architecture. Multiply accumulate operation can be performed. Fixed point, floating point, matrix operation, convolution, correlation, and parallelism all can be done in this Super Harvard architecture. It means this processor architecture is far more superior than von Neumann and Harvard architecture, where we can perform much higher operation very much faster, and with the bulk of data can be operate on. We can operate on bulk of data, and we can at the same time we can fetch a huge number of instructions, and we can perform on that instruction set according to the data memory. Now if we take a close look on the architecture here, what we have here, that in case of Harvard architecture, the data memory and the program memory are both are in different place, where we can simultaneously fetch next executable program and the operated data, the data on which the operation has been performed. We can store the data at the data memory simultaneously. Now we have added one more thing, that there is an input output controller where we can fetch data from input output controller. Through the input output controller we can fetch data from peripheral devices also. So that's why this segment has been added. And in case of CPU, what we have added an instruction cache. It means that suppose we start the processor, as the processor get its power from power supply and time with the timer circuits. Now it is operational. Now as it turned on, what the first step? The first step is to fetch a first programming instruction for the program memory. So through the address bus, through the data bus, we get the data. We get the data. We get the data. Okay. So as you are saying that the operation or the importance of instruction cache is that suppose we fetch the first programming instruction. Now as we fetch the first programming instruction, according to the programming instruction we fetch the data from the data memory. The data has been fetched by the CPU. After that data has been operated on, and after the operation we get the resultant data. At the same time, the instruction cache will store the first 2, 3, 4 according to the size of the instruction cache. Suppose we fetch the first data that has been operated on according to that program instruction, the data has been fetched. But at the very same time, the next second, third, fourth or fifth instruction that should be executed sequentially added into the instruction cache. It means after performing the first operation, the data has been stored. At the same time, from the instruction cache, the second program will also going to be fetched by the CPU. And it means, as we can see, that the second program instruction is not didn't need to be fetched from the program memory. It is already been stored in instruction cache. So the amount of the time consumption will drastically reduce. It means as we are storing the data at the data memory, at the same time simultaneously we are performing the second programming instruction. We are executing we reading the second programming instruction at the same time when we are storing the data in the data memory. After that, as we can read the second instruction according to the programming instruction, we fetch the data from here and we operate on. As according to it, suppose this instruction cache can store first 4 programming instruction. Now as first instruction has been executed, first programming instruction has been executed, the 5th programming instruction that needs to be fetched and executed will automatically go through this PM database and stored in the 4th register. This instruction cache is nothing but a accumulation or series of register where according to in a queue system, the first, second, third, fourth, 5th programming instruction are being stored. Now the first instruction as goes to the processor, immediately the 6th instruction that needs to be worked on, when the processor needs to be worked on, is just comes to through this PM database and stored in the register. So it means that the processing speed has drastically increased as we just added a instruction cache within the CPU. So it means for every programming instruction we don't need to fetch a programming instruction from the program memory. We will store this instruction cache with bulk of programming memory that needs to be operated or needs to be executed, needs to be fetched in a serial manner. It means a bulk number of programming instruction will be stored in the instruction cache. Suppose first 5 are stored. The first instruction has been executed, the sixth programming instruction will be stored in the register. As the first one has gone, the second will jump to the first slot, the third will jump to the second slot, and the fourth will jump to the third slot. And that fourth register that has been empty is being fed with the fifth programming instruction. So it means the total the processor speed has increased drastically. That's why it is much more superior than Harvard and von Neumann architecture. So let's go to the next slide. This is the DSP pipeline architecture. These are different. Now we have already the 6000 fetch 832-bit instruction per clock cycle. It means after each clock cycle, as you can see, that after each clock cycle it can fetch 832-bit instructions. A huge number of instructions. It means that the digital signal processor has got a very high processor speed. At a very similar time, it fetch 832-bit instructions at the same time. Now this is executing point 6, 7, 8, 9. This is programming PWPR. Yes, this is the program that has been fetched, this has been decoded, and this has been executed. This is the execution process. First the processor fetch the program, it will decode it, then it will execute it. After decoding, it will fetch the data from the data memory, and that operation will be performed on that data, and that is what the execution process all about. We execute the process, it means we operate on the data. After the operation, the resultant data will be stored to the data. This is the DSP pipeline architecture. If you can understand the basic process of the CPU, we can also understand the DSP pipeline architecture. It is very much similar. The basic system, the basic process is similar. Let's go to the next slide. Now the difference between digital signal processor and microcontroller. Now you can see it from here that DSP often don't have a flash program memory. They need the software to be loaded into them, whereas the microcontrollers have a non-power off erasable program memory inside. That's an important factor. Some with electrically programmable ROM store capabilities. DSPs are much faster for integer mathematics operation. That's the important part again. Whereas many microcontrollers do not have that hardware. DSPs are much faster for floating point operations. In microcontrollers, this has to be done in software. Another difference. DSPs are oriented to be an input-output device with fast calculating machine. Microcontrollers are a multi-feature device with several ways of interfacing with the world. It means different kind of peripheral device can be included with the as you have seen in the microcontrollers picture, that we have an input-output port. It means in case of microcontroller, it's a multi-feature device. It means if we have a microcontroller, we can use different kind of peripheral device. It has an interfacing capability, several ways of interfacing with the world. With the world means different kind of peripheral device. However, none are the fastest. That's another segment. We will go to the next time. We'll talk about. However, none of the fastest concept will be in later segment. These are the basic difference between DSP and microcontroller. Now let's go to the next slide. Now DSPs are not designed to be a robust device. They need a well-designed board to work properly. Microcontrollers can work on a test board. DSPs are a fast calculator microprocessor that is very effective for computing calculation and moving data, whereas microcontrollers are a more flexible device with more features. Image, audio, video processing by DSP, data transmission and control signals by microcontroller. So as we are talking about, DSPs are not designed to be a robust device. They need a well-designed board to work properly. Microcontrollers can work on a test board. DSPs are a fast calculator microprocessor that is very effective for computing calculation and moving data, whereas microcontrollers are a more flexible device with more features. That is already talked about. So let's go to the next slide. Now digital signal controllers, that is a Texas Instruments, the DSP is a digital signal processor plus a ARM processor. DaVinci video streaming application, multi-core processors, op-amp application processor, image processing, analog devices, bulk film processor, DSP plus ARM are the example of that. In case of this, we combine the processor architectures. Now let's go to the next slide. Now, what is real time means? Real time usually means time as prescribed by the external source. Now, the important factor is, in case of microcontroller, in case of digital signal processor, we deal with a real time situation, real time operation. As according to that, as CPU fetch the programming instruction, at the that time, within a very few microseconds, milliseconds, the data has been fetched, it has been operated on, and the executed resultant data that has been derived from within the CPU has been stored in the data memory. So that's why it is the real time scenarios has been taken here. The real time usually means time as prescribed by external sources. For example, the time struck by clock, however fast or late it might be. That's the point. Now let's go to the next slide. You may like to adjust the zoom of the digital camera. These are also an example of that. You may like to reduce the screen brightness. You may like to relay a specific song from your favorite FM station to your friend using your mobile. These all are the real time situation, real time problems, real time data has been operated on. You may like to use it as a calculator, address, emailing device, etc. This variation in the functionality can only be achieved by a very flexible device. That's why microcontrollers and DSP have been considered. Now, the characteristics of a real-time embedded system. There are three characteristics. 1. Single function. 2. Tightly constrained. 3. Reactive and real-time. Now we will discuss about these three things. Single function. Here single function is the name specifies the theory here, that here single function means specific functions. The RTS is usually meant for very specific function. Generally, a special purpose microprocessor executes a program over and over again for a specific purpose. If the user wants to change the functionality, changing the mobile phone from conversation to camera mode or calculator mode, the program gets flushed out and a new program is loaded which carries out the requisite function. These operations are monitored, controlled by an operating system called as real-time operating system, which has much simpler complexity but more rigid constraint as compared to the conventional operating systems such as Microsoft Windows, Unix, etc. Now let's go to the next slide. Now, tightly constrained. Tightly constrained means the constraints on the design and marketability of RTS are more rigid than their non-real-time, non-embedded counterparts. Time domain constraints are the first thing that is taken care while developing such a system. Size, weight, power consumption, cost. All these things needs to be considered, because the size, weight and power consumption are the most specific three characteristics that needs to be reduced. The size, the weight and the power consumption needs to be reduced, and cost also. These are the major factors. And reactive and real time. Many embedded systems must continually react to changes in the system's environment and must compute certain results in real time without delay. For example, a car's cruise controller continually monitors and reacts to speed and brake sensors. It must compute acceleration or deceleration amounts repeatedly within a limited time. A delayed computation could result in a failure to maintain control of the car. In contrast, a desktop computer system typically focuses on computation, with relatively infrequent from the computer's perspective reactions to input device. In addition, a delay in those computations, while perhaps inconvenient to the computer user, typically does not result in a system failure. Let's go to the next slide. Some common characteristics of embedded system. Single function, that we already said. These are the summation of those three definitions. Single function executes a single program immediately. Tightly constrained, low cost, low power, small, fast. That's the most important factor in case of that embedded system. Reactive and real time. Continually reacts to changes in the system environment. Must compute certain results in real time without delay. These are the three different characteristics of embedded system that is need to be taken care of. A short list of embedded systems. There are different kind of things are there. Anti-lock brakes, anti-focus cameras. You can see about that. And this is the last one. This is the embedded system example of a digital camera. Now you can see that this is a single function. Always because we can see this is a digital camera. In case of digital camera, it is important that it needs to be tightly constant. If we can see that first we have analog cameras, now when you go to the digital camera, the size of the camera is it as the cameras, the quality of the camera increased, but the size of the camera got decreased because the low cost, low power, and small and fast. These are the four major factors. Is have to be, because reactive, in case of reactive and real time, in case of digital camera, the reaction and the real time, it needs to be a small, it's a small extent. In these two feature, it should be considered in a small extent in case of digital camera. And it's always have to be single function because it's a digital camera. We need to capture different kind of images. That's the basic purpose of a digital camera. Now what we have here, charge coupled device preprocessor here. In case of digital camera, CCD or the charge coupled device is the most basic thing that we basic components of a digital camera. Pixel preprocessor also is requires a basic architecture of the digital camera. Microcontroller is also there, multiplier is also there. This is the display control, LCD control, UART. Now you are going to understand how the LCD control, UART, ISA bus, memory controller, DMA controller works. UPGA codec, A2D, CCD processor, pixel preprocessor, and D2A, digital to analog converter. All these things has been accumulated in this digital camera chip, and this is the basic architecture of digital camera. So today we cover the embedded processor part. From the next slide, we are going to cover the processor architecture and many other features of processor embedded system. Thank you. That's for now.